KREM 2 News begins now.
It's been a busy week for news across the inland Northwest. Let's get you caught up with the KREM 2 News Week in Review. I'm Tim Pham. Thanks for joining us here on KREM 2 Plus. Here now is a look at some of the biggest stories from this past week.
Well, there were many fallen trees on the road today, but I am told by police there was only one deadly accident. 2 men died after a tree fell on their vehicle. This happened about 6:30 in the morning on Highway 2 near the airport exit.
Washington State Patrol tells me this was a freak accident. They say the winds were between 45 and 50 miles per hour, which knocked the tree to the ground.
Units arrived. They indicated that there was a tree fully across the eastbound and westbound lanes, and a box truck was off into the trees and several vehicles on the shoulders of the right shoulder of the eastbound lanes.
The Spokane County Medical Examiner has not released the identities of the people killed and won't until next of kin has been notified. They expect to release those names tomorrow. This was the only deadly incident in the area, but Washington State Department of Transportation East responded to multiple wind and tree debris accidents.
Trees down reported on Highway 20 near Tiger, which is east of Colville, and then another report on 395, kind of north on Deer Park, and then one closer to Loon Lake, and an additional one on Highway US 195 south of Spokane.
And as wind and fallen trees have been consistent throughout the day, Washington DOT say they want drivers to be extra cautious on the road.
Move over and slow down. So if there is another lane available for people to move over while we are working on the side of the road, that is the law.
And we will continue to follow up on that deadly accident from this morning. We just found out the truck was a company vehicle from a company called Stericycle. They have an office over in Airway Heights. Stericycle did tell KREM in an email that they are grateful to the authorities who responded to the scene, and they are sending deepest condolences to the families and friends impacted. In Spokane, Regan Gallo, KREM 2 News.
Tonight, the families of the victims are still processing this unexpected loss. Today, I was only able to find a GoFundMe account for one of the victims, Elisha Brian. Now, that's how I was able to connect with a close family friend who says Brian was a soft-spoken man, but when it came to talking about his children, he was the loudest in the room.
As the day went on, it just started to hit, and even now it's hitting hard, so.
An early morning crash kills 2 men while on the clock. Elisha Brian and Eric Saint worked for a waste disposal company called Stericycle when a tree fell on the truck they were driving, causing them to drive off the road. Both lanes of US Highway 2 were blocked for several hours. The Spokane County Medical Examiner says Brian and Saint died from blunt force trauma. After confirming their identities, I was able to find out that Brian was engaged and is a father to 4 children, the youngest being a 1-year-old boy. Brian's fiancée didn't feel comfortable speaking with us, but I spoke with a close family friend with permission from Brian's family.
I just couldn't believe it. I had no words.
Carl Einey describes the type of man Brian was and the legacy he leaves behind.
He was a kind person. Even though he was quiet and he was always in the corner of the room, you can always feel his presence. He was a very loving father. The love for his children, man, it was fierce.
A GoFundMe set up by Brian's former co-workers asks the community to support his family the way he supported others.
It just shows that everyone loved him. Everyone's thinking about him. Everyone's thinking about Jimena and the kids.
In addition to the GoFundMe, the Spokane Police Foundation is also taking donations to help both families impacted by the crash. Now, we are still working to connect with Saint's family, but in the meantime, the foundation says Spokane PD investigation asked it to assist with the family's rent. We will have those links to make donations on KREM.com. In the newsroom, Christian Garza, KREM 2 News.
Across North Idaho, pines swayed and lines of lights did the twist. While inside this Hayden school, that hallway monitor hand jive
Go back to your class.
Is how security officer Stan Peterson provided a support in the storm.
Yeah, it is. As you can see, the wind's still blowing.
Giant trees like this one snapped in Wednesday's windstorm. And while I'm standing just feet from Hayden Canyon Charter School, it was actually another downed tree that canceled classes here.
So that knocked out our heating system knocked out all the lights, obviously, in the school. So the lift station that shoots our sewer water down to the main, that went out.
Knocking out about 5 hours of the day for 580 students who likely did the happy dance as they exited by emergency light. At a school where hikes and exploring are part of the curriculum,
So we're an outdoor exploring type school.
consider it the day's last lesson, courtesy of Mother Nature herself. Shannon Moudy, KREM 2 News.
Washington State Patrol is reporting 19 total collisions since the start of the snowfall. 9 of those were right here in Spokane County. I've been checking in with WSP all day, and they say we're actually pretty lucky with the timing of the snowfall today. Sergeant Greg Riddell says it didn't start to impact the Spokane area until about 10 this morning, which was after the morning commute. He says even the 3 collisions that happened just before noon in Spokane were either minor or no injuries at all. Still, Sergeant Riddell says the trend with today's collisions is driving too fast for the road conditions.
The law says you have to be traveling at a safe speed at all times to avoid a collision due to weather conditions. And so we have to be driving a safe and prudent speed during those weather conditions.
As for Spokane City streets, conditions have improved since this afternoon. Main roads are mostly wet with slush in some places, but still watch out for those slick spots. On the side roads, though, it is thicker and slicker, so approach those areas with caution. Now, the city of Spokane tweeted street crews have been out treating arterial curves and hills since this morning. It's asking drivers to slow down and drive for conditions. Here on Arthur and 5th in Spokane, you can just see the stark difference between city streets and the highway. Right here you can see there's just a collection of slush, mostly wet, pretty good traction compared to the highway on I-90 where the roads are mostly bare and wet. Again, traction looking pretty good, but still look out for those slick spots. Reporting in Spokane, Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
Welcome back to the KREM 2 News Weekend Review. I'm Tim Pham. Let's get back now to some of the biggest news stories from the Inland Northwest this past week.
Maintenance crews have been positively humming after water at a dozen Spokane public schools tested positive for lead.
5 parts per billion is a microscopic amount of anything, right? Not just lead.
Small maybe, but for Kevin Grimm's crew,
it's a big deal.
Washington's legislature passed a lead action threshold in 2021, 5 parts per billion, much lower than the federal standard, 15 ppb. Under state law, schools built before 2016 have a heavy metal task, testing every faucet and fountain.
It has, yeah. We've learned a lot about lead that we never knew, that's for certain.
Federal and state agencies agree on one thing: there is no safe level of lead in children. The CDC says exposure can cause damage to the brain and nervous system, slow growth and development, and lead to problems with learning, behavior, hearing, and speech.
Yeah, we have had a couple of sites that have been in the double digits.
The district says most failed water fixtures were only slightly above the state's threshold. Grimm says it's not a district-specific problem either. Washington Department of Health results show 63% of schools had at least one fixture fail the test. Just over 10% of all fixtures tested were above the action level.
At first it was surprising until I did some research and realized that there's lead in all the drinking water. It's not just isolated to the schools.
Grimm says it's also not a pipe problem. He points to the source, Spokane's aquifer.
No, we don't have any lead pipes in any of our schools, so it's being introduced from the water that's piped into the school from like the street. The fixture is the end game of trapping the lead, essentially.
KREM 2 News called the city's water department for comment, but didn't hear back. While they're only mandated to turn them into hand wash only, SPS crews are replacing every impacted fixture.
So the fixtures we're replacing are 100% lead free, they're called, which is something that is done in the whole entire state on new builds. So they're lead free, which means any lead in the water won't stick to the inside of those fixtures.
For a full list of lead results in Spokane and other school districts, head to KREM.com. Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
The Othello community is looking for answers after the recent announcement that one of their high schools, Desert Oasis High School right behind me, is going to be shut down come next school year. In an effort to be more proactive and make sure the Othello School District doesn't use any more of its reserve money, Superintendent Pete Perez says the district had to make changes to better support students with the resources available to them. By the end of the school year, the district projects it will need about $3 million from its reserve funds. That's why the district is implementing what it calls the right sizing plan to help replenish the reserve fund and set the district up for success in the future.
But what I'm really proud of is that we've done it early enough that we can get their input and put together a good program and supports for everybody on each side of this issue.
Superintendent Perez says the driving factor in this decision was the fact that student enrollment is flat, meaning it isn't growing and bringing in money to the district like in years past.
Think, a couple years down the road, and so what we see coming is we're not going to be able to sustain some of the services that were offered.
The current plan is to eliminate 23 positions across the district from the different schools, 20 of those being teachers and 3 of those being administrators. This plan will also merge Desert Oasis High School and Othello High School together, which, according to the district, would save about $750,000.
For myself, the first thing that I thought about is, how would this impact our students?
However, this change directly affects students and staff under Joshua Tovar, who has been principal of Desert Oasis High School for the last 8 years. Tovar, along with select staff from Desert Oasis High School, will make the transition with students over to Othello High School to create a plan of action for merging the two groups, as well as all the programs Desert Oasis currently offers.
We want to continue to grow some of the things that we're doing, some of the tools that we're using at our current high school into our larger high school and be able to impact the student body as well as the staff there as well.
Superintendent Perez says while Othello High School is close to capacity, there is space for the close to 100 new students coming from Desert Oasis. Administrators at both the district level and Desert Oasis High School tell me that students and their education will remain a top priority for them moving forward. In Othello, Christian Garza, KREM 2 News.
From the City Council agenda, we know the funds will go to the Spokane Police Department to coordinate responses and patrols when retail crime happens in the city. This follows a report from this past February by Forbes Advisor with findings that Washington State is the #1 state impacted by retail crime.
A lot changed with the laws that passed around 2020 in regards to what loss prevention was able to do. That completely tied their hands. The bad guys know it.
Spokane Downtown Partnership says the retail crime is not the sole reason for businesses closing, but it is a contributing factor, especially for local business.
We track open and closed businesses within the Downtown Business Improvement District, which is about 80 blocks of the core of downtown. This is the first year since 2020 that more businesses have closed than open.
City officials say this funding will allow Spokane police more money and more time to respond and carry out charges for organized retail crime.
Patrol can only get to the shoplifters that they have time to get to. And so loss prevention can only hang on to them for so long, or they can't hang on to them at all. And so those people go free and they're never held accountable for it.
I am told this also includes an increase in organized blitzes, where officers will target specific stores and areas to arrest shoplifters. I am told by city officials that this is a procedural vote since the funding is over $50,000. The city is expected to approve the funding tonight, and the money has a period performance timeline by next June. In downtown Spokane, Regan Gallo, KREM 2 News.
Spokane County law enforcement now has a new tiny tool.
Okay, so in the amount of $19,647.38, Chief, we're happy to present this to you.
Thanks to a safety grant from the Spirit of Blue Foundation, around 135 Guardian Angel wearable lights are rolling out among Spokane Valley Police and Spokane County deputies.
We even donated enough to cover all the dogs so that the dogs can have them on them when they're out on a track or something like that.
out on a track, or directing traffic. The multifunction lights can make officers more visible.
In the United States alone, in the first half of 2024, 9 officers have been killed directing traffic or outside of their vehicle.
Or keep them invisible.
You can see that flashing light from a long ways away.
The infrared option can't be seen by the naked eye, but it can be seen by an eye in the sky, a helicopter or drone.
A drone operator and a scene supervisor might be able to know exactly where their personnel are.
Spokane County just rolled out the lights a couple weeks ago, but Sheriff John Knowles says they've already come against situations they could have used them in, like a foot chase last month.
It became obvious to him as he was giving his location out over the radio that his backup officers were having trouble finding him. And he felt that had he had one of these devices, they would have been able to locate him a little bit faster.
Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
The emergency operations plan is causing some concern for Cooney County residents tonight. It says anyone who refuses a government-ordered evacuation may be arrested. In the more than 200-page document, county emergency management officials mapped out different emergency situations and agencies who respond to them. During a governor-ordered evacuation, local law enforcement has the ability to arrest someone who doesn't comply. That didn't sit well with Paul Van Noy, the senior pastor of Candlelight Christian Fellowship in Coeur d'Alene.
Always have things in order, a plan to keep our people safe. The problem with what we've just heard is that there is too much vague language.
Van Noy argues the ability to arrest someone who refuses to leave their home in an evacuation is not something officials should have authority on. Councilman Kenny Gabriel with District 4 says that statement is an insignificant part of the entire plan as a whole.
And I think that's such a very small part of the plan. It's like one sentence that says may be arrested.
Chief of Police Lee White says the ability to arrest someone refusing a governor-ordered evacuation is still up to the jurisdiction's law enforcement.
There's laws on the books that officers have the discretion whether or not to make an arrest or write a report or take any action that we exercise daily.
Chief White emphasizes the police department is not intending on arresting someone who would refuse to leave their property. Van Noy says that's not enough.
Even when we have commitment from, let's say, present officials who make commitments to, for example, say, well, we're not going to arrest anybody. We don't know what the future holds.
Its authority County Emergency Management says has and is still active. Van Noy says he's going to try and change it.
I'll be talking to the county commissioners, and I'm going to, of course, talk to our senators. I'm going to be doing some homework on this all the way up to Boise, or down, shall I say, to Boise. And so we're going to have to change this from the state level.
Connor McAvoy, KREM 2 News.
Research from the Panhandle Affordable Housing Alliance says that in 2020, about 70% of people in the area could afford a home. Now that number has flipped. They say now only about 20% of people can afford a home in this area.
The Panhandle Affordable Housing Alliance said that the decrease in affordable housing has been a growing issue since 2008. The problem has been exacerbated by the impacts of COVID and the overall growth in the state. I am told the groups most affected are students, recent graduates, healthcare, construction workers, and even families. Which is why the Housing Solutions Partnership wants to do a second launch of its home share program, which first started in 2022. The program aims to have empty nesters, snowbirds, or anyone with spare bedrooms or living space to house those who need a place to stay.
Since 2022, we found just conversationally that there were barriers that folks were running into that didn't allow them to want to share their home.
Program leaders like Miller want to know if they provide incentives and funding for homeowners to remodel their homes to make space for an additional person or family, if it might increase participation.
And sometimes they're very small, like they have a great basement that has a separate bedroom and a separate bathroom, but it has no egress window to it. So things that bring the home up to code, that allow it to be more convenient for the family that lives there and in compliance for the person who moves in.
And I am told, depending on the type of living space, the price is flexible to make it worthwhile for both the homeowner and the tenant.
So if it's a room, then we cap ourselves off at $800 a month, which really, supports a home provider. It's $800 less they're paying a month.
Currently, the program has about 50 active matches, with an additional 20 homeowners ready to find a tenant. Organizers want to expand that number in 2025. The survey from Housing Solutions Partnership will tell community officials if the community has interest in this program. Right now, it is slated to stay open until December 20th for input. In Coeur d'Alene, Regan Gallo, KREM 2 News.
Thank you for joining us here on KREM 2 Plus. For the KREM 2 News Weekend Review, remember, you can always watch our latest newscast and weather forecast right here on KREM 2 Plus. Just click on the video in the bottom navigation menu. I'm Tim Pham. Thanks for watching.